Mariette's on the move.
What?
Mariette's on the move.
Again?
Mariette's on the move.
If you are dreaming about moving to a new city to pursue the life of your dreams, this podcast is for you. Moving 18 times in 23 years to 5 of America's top cities, I know it's not easy to make those decisions alone. I help you develop the dream, the plan, and the move, even if we need to get scrappy to get you there. I'll be doing interviews, career and city spotlights, and sharing my crazy moving stories, tips, tricks, and scams to avoid. Traveling to explore your dreams has never been easier. Now let's get moving. Well, welcome to the show, everyone. I am super excited for today's guest. I have Dr. Kate Steiner, who is a burnout recovery strategist, consultant, speaker, and CEO of Lift Wellness Consulting. She supports professionals in overcoming burnout through a proven reflection and developmental process, which we will get into today. Holding a master's of counseling and a PhD in counselor education and supervision, her practice is grounded in the research-based Steiner self-reflective sustainability and wellness model. It's the SSRSW model, published in the Journal of Sorority and Fraternity Life Research and Practice. As a lifetime researcher in wellness and burnout, Dr. Steiner is the author of Feeling Crispy, A Guide to Burnout Recovery, which I love the title of, and the host of Feeling Crispy from Burnout to Recovery podcast. So her mission is to end the burnout cycle for professionals so they are living happier, healthier lives. And I feel like we need that so badly today, especially as we embark on National Moving Month and the Summer of Moves. Dr. Kate Steiner, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here with you today.
Yeah, so you just moved last year, so you know
I
all
did.
about
I know
moving.
all about moving, and I love my new house. I love my new space. It was definitely a positive move for myself and my husband, and I don't want to do it again for a while.
It is very stressful. It can definitely, if you're already feeling burned out, man, will that accelerate the burnout
absolutely
process? But you do have a lovely, if you're watching on YouTube, Dr. Kate's got a lovely background, blue wallpaper with flowers on it, kind of like my flowers a little bit back here. But yeah, so I wanted to bring you on the show today because one, I feel like, you know, we're post-pandemic in theory, and I feel like the burnout that was in the pandemic is still very real. I know you worked around the college scene a little bit, so I want to talk a little bit about that. But also just kind of like some of the strategies and things that you're helping people to kind of overcome and be aware of this. I mean, obviously in the Fred framework, we talk about mental health and the robustness. But just even some of the things that people can do to like take it down a notch and like be aware of it. So I would love to get your perspective on some of that, what you're seeing right now in your practice.
Yeah. So big thing, I think, yes, we're still seeing a lot of burnout. I think that has kind of continued through the pandemic, and part of that comes from like there is a lot of financial worry out there right now with the economy and those kinds of things, and so and it's some of those things are just really hard. For folks, like it's hard to make ends meet. It's hard to go to the grocery store, and something that used to, you know, a bag of grocery that used to cost maybe $50 can cost up to like $150 now. Yeah. And so definitely seeing a lot of folks challenged by just that overall stress of, you know, I'm struggling to make things work when they were working before, but now I need more to be able to make things work. And so one of the things that I really work with folks on is one, kind of recognizing that burnout is just truly a human condition, right? We are all going to experience it at some point. And so kind of getting away from the idea that we can avoid it. It has been a really important like mindset shift for me, but also for the people that I work with, because once we realize that we can't avoid it, and it's like, so it's not something that we can kind of like duck and cover from, right? Right. Or we just implement like, I have the most perfect wellness practice and I will never feel stressed again. Sadly, no.
unrealistic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not the case. But having that wellness practice absolutely will help you be more resilient when burn events and when burnout comes up for you, when these stressors come up for you in your life. And that's what I really work with people on, is feeling like figuring out, what does that resilience look like? How do we prepare for events that we know are going to be happening? Because sometimes you can look at your calendar and know when stress is coming, right?
Uh-huh.
You know when you're going to have a really busy week at work. You know when maybe you have a project launching or a move is happening or something is going on that you know is going to be stressful. So how do you prepare for those moments? And then how do you have planned recovery and then consistent recovery throughout the day so that you don't get to this state of like overwhelm?
Yeah. So if somebody is burned out, like maybe let's take a step back. How
Mhm.
do you know you're burned out? Like, what does that
Mhm.
feel like? What are some of the symptoms? Like,
Yeah.
because I feel like sometimes people are like, we can recognize when someone else is burned out and they're like, barely surviving. And sometimes when you're in it, you can't. Like, you're
Yeah.
just like, I'm just tired. I'll get an extra hour of sleep. And to me, that doesn't work.
Mhm. Yeah. So I think some of the things to really recognize, and so burnout can show up kind of physically, emotionally, in a lot of different ways. So physically, we can start to have headaches, stomach aches, fatigue, foggy headedness, just not being able to come up with the words and struggling to that piece. Of course, just feeling overall stress, anxiety, even sadness and anger. A lot of people who are burned out they have less patience. They're more
Yeah.
short-tempered. And
Mm.
so for me, I start to recognize my burnout when it comes up in terms of like road rage, right?
Yeah.
So if I say someone cuts me off or someone passes me on a double yellow line, which actually happens around here quite a bit in mountain roads, but
Yeah. You're around Roanoke,
around
Virginia.
Roanoke, yeah, the Smith Mountain Lake area. So we have
Yeah.
lots of curvy roads, 2
Switchbacks
lanes,
scare the
and yes.
yeah.
So, but I can kind of recognize where I'm at in my own stress level and burnout based on my reaction to
Mm.
like they're cutting me off or they're passing me on a double yellow line or something to that effect. If I react in a way of like, you jerk, or, oh, I guess we're in such a hurry, I guess you're more important than everybody else on the road, and those kind of things. If I react
Yeah.
in that way, I know that I'm in a more stressed state and probably
Yeah.
starting to feel a little burned out. If I react in a way of like, kind of like, okay, like initially I probably still have that like, did you really need
Did
to
you
break the
really just
law in
yeah.
order to do, to get to where
There's
you're going?
nobody behind me and you could
Right.
have just waited, but
Yes.
thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. But if I react in a way I'm like, I guess they're in a hurry, maybe they have to get somewhere, or I just kind of be like, okay, that happened, and move
Yeah.
on from it, then I know that I am in a more kind of like even keel, more balanced state. So
Yeah.
it's really kind of recognizing and thinking about, what are the indicators for yourself? Like, what comes up for you emotionally, what comes up for you physically, but also how do you react to other people around you? How do you react to someone pissing you off? Do
Yeah.
do you go from 1 to 100, or are you able to kind of let it just flow off your shoulders?
Yeah. I'm very much the one, I get super stressed out about travel, which normally,
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm very grateful for it. I travel a lot for my job. But every once in a while it like sneaks up on me when I know I have a ton of stuff I need to get done at
Yeah.
home and I haven't slept in my own bed in a week or two. Like, I know that I'm very reactive on that.
Yeah.
I could totally see that as a symptom for me for
Yeah.
sure. For sure.
Yeah.
So like mentally, how are you feeling? Are you like I think part of it is that you don't realize it you're burned out until it like sneaks up on you and punches you in
Mm-hmm.
the face, and then all of a sudden you're like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Right? So how do you combat that?
Yeah. So a big piece is, I think, so the system that I use and the model that I developed is essentially 3 phases. So there's observation, preparation, and recovery, and it's all anchored in the process of self reflection. So it's really important that you kind of turn inward and kind of look at yourself and kind of think about how your own reactions, what you need for recovery and those kinds of things. So that first piece is observation, but that's really kind of figuring out, what do I look like when I'm burned out or when I'm super stressed out? And we can do this in a couple different ways. You can kind of just assess yourself when you're having stressed moments, like, how do I react? What does that look like? How am I feeling? How does it show up in my body? But you can also ask like trusted people around you, right? So the people that know and love you, that you can take that feedback from. And you want to do it in a like in a time and place, like you want to ask for it, right? You don't want the feedback to be forced upon you. That doesn't feel good to anybody.
Right.
But if you ask for it, like, hey, I'm trying to figure out what my indicators are for burnout.
Yeah.
Can you, like, when you see me feeling like really stressed out or really overwhelmed, what do you see? How do I react to you? What is like the tip off for you? Like, oh, I should probably, like, she's overwhelmed, she's stressed, or I may need to steer clear. So I had asked my husband that at one point in time, and he's like, oh no, I know when you're stressed out because you're a little short-tempered with me and you're walking around the house and your shoulders are like this. And I'm raising my shoulders up towards my ears for those listening. But when you have, he's like, you just look super tense. And he's like, I was like, so that I know is like an important indicator. And when I feel my shoulders start to really tense up, I know that I might need to think about, what I'm doing for recovery practices a little bit more. Once you kind of know and can recognize like when those things are happening, then you can start to think about, okay, what do I need to find some sense of like calm in my life? And slowing down is a big part of recovery. Being mindful is a big part of recovery. And that's where it gets really hard, I think, for people.
Because I think just being self-aware in general sometimes can be hard, because it's like, I know I'm burned out. I get it. Like, I'm already impatient with myself that I didn't get a bunch of stuff done, but now I have even more things I have to get done. So I imagine that's, it's hard to, be kind to yourself when you're in that state of, I know I'm being self-aware and I get it, and I'm just still mad.
Yes.
So you layer on the stress of a move, you layer on the stress of having to pack up all your stuff. I mean, that'll get you for sure. So what's the second step?
So the second step is preparation. And this is kind of the place where we think about what are those stressful times that we know are coming. So I refer to stressors in our life as burn events. So burn events are things that can cause like overwhelm, emotional fatigue, kind of emotional drain, just kind of overall like feeling tired. These are things that just make you tired. And or crispy, if you will.
I love the crispy.
And we have two types. There are expected and unexpected burn events. So expected are things that you can look at your calendar and know that time is coming. You know that event is occurring. You know that you're going to feel a little more stressed out during that time. And then the unexpected events are the things that like pop up and kind of surprise you. It's that unexpected news. It is, you mentioned travel. For me, it's like delayed travel. Like for me, an expected burn event is travel. The unexpected part of that then is like when travel gets delayed or something like that can cause extra stress. And preparation, one of the things with preparation is really looking at those expected burn events and almost highlighting them on your calendar and thinking about, how can I go into this event in the best way I possibly can, knowing that it's going to wear me out a little bit. Do I need to think about my sleep differently leading up to it? Do I need to think about my water intake differently, or how I'm exercising and moving my body? What kind of breaks do I need to take during the day while this is happening? And that's an important piece. And then you also want to have planned recovery immediately following those burn events. So how are you going to kind of like recalibrate and recover as soon as that event is over? And what does that look like? And then the other piece with preparation is really setting boundaries, both with other people and kind of those expectations for yourself, and how you manage your day-to-day so that you can have time between like your work self and the rest of your life.
Boom. Play it.
Have you ever listened to a commercial on the radio or a podcast and thought, I could totally do that? Well, I am challenging you today. Being a voiceover artist is an amazing side hustle that can be done from the comforts of your own home. Heck, it can be an amazing career. Just ask Jesse Carroll. Jesse's got over 1,000 voiceover credits to his name. Ever watch Backroad Truckers? He's the narrator. He's also done a ton of commercials for brands you would definitely recognize. If you're ready to try your hand at voiceovers, go to mariette'sonthemove.com and head to my favorites page to learn more about his new digital course and coaching package. If you use code MOTM, you'll get 20% off at checkout.
Have you heard of Monat or Modern Nature? I hadn't either before my friend Monica was raving about their skincare products that she's obsessed with. I took their hair quiz to find out which product line would be best for me since I just happen to be looking for new shampoo and conditioner, and I signed up for their VIP package that got me a little bit of everything to try out. Turns out they are the first anti-aging hair care line in the world, which I didn't even know was a thing, and their products are gluten-free, vegan, and Leaping Bunny certified, which means they're never tested on animals. Now I'm obsessed with their rich formulations that feature botanical extracts, essential oils, and other naturally based ingredients, and I want to share those products with you. I'll put the link in the show notes, or you can hit the faves page on my website. It's safe, EU approved, and clinically tested by third parties, so essentially, robustness approved. Now back to the show. Yeah, I find I get burned out, especially because my travel, it's weird. Like Q1, like the first 4 months of the year for me, because I work in healthcare and I work in technology and I'm in sales, right? So I'm a sales leader in my full-time job. And what's hard is Q1 is like everybody's got a kickoff. Then we've got all the conferences kick off. And then, and it's just like one thing after another. I mean, at one point in time, there were was traveling 3.5 weeks, including the weekends. And what I found myself doing, and this is something that I learned a couple moves ago, unfortunately, because it was very much like boom, 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 it's all happening. Oh, by the way, I've got to move to Charlotte. Now I've got to pack up all my stuff. For me, it's having a sense of routine when I'm on the road. So like yesterday I was in Tampa, and in the morning, like I had a bunch of stuff that was supposed to happen. We had meetings that were supposed to happen, and they got canceled. So I had a couple meetings on my calendar still in the morning that were just, standing meetings, but I made it a point to go and sit at a coffee shop and, take a little bit of time before all the meetings kicked off and just have that routine. Because in the mornings at home, I wake up, like I have one of those coffee pots that you hit the ceiling when it starts grinding because it's set on an alarm and it's like 5 a.m. But I love being able to just sit in my bed, watch the news with a cup of coffee before I pick up my phone or I pick up any type of social media or anything, just to process what's going to happen in my day. And that's like my tiny bit of routine. And like, if I can bring that on the road with me, that feels good and it feels normal. But when I don't have a routine and all that's off, I am not happy at all.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's almost like finding and being aware of like you said, what your triggers are, but then also like how to overcome it and see it, because you can see it coming, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, moving, if you're like, we've got a lot of young adults graduating from college soon, right? So talk about financial triggers. When you said earlier, they're going to be, those school loans are going to kick in, 90 days after? You're going to, there's that whole unknown, like I'm going to be starting a new job. And I also think too, and I don't know that I mentioned this to you before, but almost training for that full-time job, like those 40 hours a week. Because when you're in college, like you've got a couple classes a day maybe, but your day's kind of on you. Whereas like when you pick up a corporate job, you're 40 hours a week committed at least, especially when you're like making a new name. And it's exhausting. Like if you haven't worked full-time ever, like 40 hours in a row in a week, like that's a long time.
It is.
So, I mean, you worked in high ed, right? So how were you coaching these guys to like get out in the world? Like, what
Yeah.
was that like?
Yeah. So I had the opportunity to work with I worked with fraternities and sororities on college campuses. So I worked with, really driven student leaders and those kinds of things. So we really
Yeah.
worked on a lot of things in terms of like, kind of priority setting. How do you, kind of almost balance out your day? And when I say balance, I kind of mean like making sure that you're not putting more on your plate than you can manage for that day,
Ooh,
right?
that's a problem for me. Yeah.
And we all do that. Like it's
Yeah.
just, it's just hard. And one of the things that I would kind of encourage them, I'm like, if something falls off your plate, or if you like if you feel like you've got a lot of spinning plates and one of them drops, instead of getting upset about it, assess what plate dropped. Like maybe it
Mm,
needed to. Maybe
yeah.
that thing needed to fall off your plate. Maybe it wasn't as important as some of these other things that are happening, and that's okay, but have a plan to either get back to that thing if it's something that you need to accomplish, or do you need to reassess what is actually on your plate
Mm,
in those things because it needs to be added back or something to that effect. So we did a lot of
yeah.
conversations around like priority setting.
Mm,
And I think that's important as you're getting into a new job and you think about like, okay, I've got all of these hours that I've got to fill for, what is that going to look like? How am I going to priority set when it comes to this new job? And
yeah.
how to have how do I have a conversation with, my colleagues, with my supervisor in what their expectations are in regard to priority setting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's a physical element to it as well. Like, I know when I'm not eating well, I don't feel well. Right.
Right.
And I know there's a lot of science around like the gut brain connection. And
Yes.
when you start a new job or when, there's a lot of people are emotional
Mhm.
eaters, right? If you're going through a divorce and you're transitioning and you just want that comfort 3 or 4 days later could really
Mhm.
impact your mental health,
Mhm.
and you're not making that connection
Yeah.
from a nutrition perspective. So it's
Yeah.
almost like you have to train like mind, body, and soul to be able to get through it, but also recognize that that's what you have to do to get through it,
Yes. Yeah. No, that's a really important point. And I think and that's another piece of like that preparation phase is really kind of like, what does your overall wellness look like? Like, what are you looking at in terms of your physical wellness? So how are you moving your body? What are you putting into your body? Do you drink enough water? What does your sleep look like?
Yeah.
What does your social wellness look like? How do you, and how are you engaging with other human beings? Because we all need to engage with other human
Yeah.
beings. It's incredibly important.
Yeah.
That emotional wellness, financial wellness. How do you look at a budget? Do you look at a
Do you have
budget?
a budget?
Yeah. Do you look at your bank account and hope, oh, I hope there's money in there right now?
Yes.
I've been there. I get it.
Uh-huh.
But
Uh-huh.
when we're doing that, we create extra stress for ourselves.
Yeah.
What does our spiritual wellness look like? How are you connecting to something that's greater than yourself? And what does that look like? Is it a connection to nature? Is it a connection to a religious or spirituality or the universe and hell? And what is that you're doing? And so really kind of thinking about all of these pieces. And I really like to encourage folks to remember that you don't want to think about doing like every single part of wellness as like to 100 degrees, right?
Right.
That's really hard.
Yeah.
But I like to think of it more as like there's spokes on a wheel. And what we want to have is like an even wheel. We don't want to have a
Mm,
flat tire. So if you have one of those areas that you're not doing as well with, then you have that flat tire, that makes it harder to just kind of
yeah.
thrive, right? And
Yeah.
so trying to kind of at least pay equal attention to all of those areas can be a big
Yeah.
help.
Yeah, I know that at least for me, so a lot of times after a move, if somebody hasn't gone through like kind of all the Fred framework type
Mhm.
areas and at least be aware of like where you are financially or mental and physically, your community, all that stuff. If it's getting you closer to your dreams, that's the D.
Yeah.
Um, I call it the 6 month funk. Like you get
Mhm.
into this, like the newness of a town wears off. You've done all the
Mhm.
tours, you've seen all the stuff, you've tried all the coffee shops, and then all of a sudden you're like, what did I do? Right? Like
Mhm.
I find for me, and especially like in my own mental health, I've had depression, I've tried, I've had anxiety, I've had all those things, but I find like I have a list, and there's like 10 things on the list that I go through. So it's like, how am I eating? Am I exercising? Am I getting in community? Am I in church? And I have this whole list. And I don't know if you see a balance in your practice between men and women, but I had done, I was an ambassador for our mental health kind of like program at my company. And we've got 15,000 people that work for my company globally. It's a Fortune 200 huge company. And as an ambassador, I was highlighted for like in an email that went out basically to the whole company for Mental Health Awareness Month. And I mentioned this list. And it was funny because I had a couple women that reached out to me and was like, oh my gosh, thank you for putting that out there. Like, that was so vulnerable. Like, I mean, I laid it out there. Because I don't, to me, like, if you're not talking about it, it's sitting inside somewhere and it's eating you alive. And that's, in my opinion, where like the cancers and all that stuff come from.
Yes. Yeah.
But the craziest thing, and I even went to our chair, like our groups, and I was like, we need to do something for the men in this company, because I had like, it was something like 23 men reached out to me and said, can I get your list? And I said, no, you have to make your own list. And then I started like pairing them together, because I'm like, it's easier for you to talk to another dude, like get in there, talk about what you do. Like when you feel amazing, I almost feel like this is what you need to do. When you feel amazing, like write down what you're doing right now. Like, are you working out a lot? Are you eating well? Are you, going to pickleball twice a week? I don't know, whatever people do. I do Pilates. Yeah. But like when you're in the depths of like not feeling well, that's not when you make the list, right? It's like when you're feeling good, I feel like. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yes,
Is there a balance between men and women?
Like I love the idea of like the list and that piece. And I think that's incredibly important. It's similar to something I tell clients about, which is like your comfort list, right? Which is like the list of things that bring you comfort, joy, peace.
Yeah.
And creating that list of things that can help you before you get into that state of stress, I think is incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
But I do think that I think that men have an additional challenge when it comes to some of these things, whether it be mental health, whether it be burnout, because of one, I think that we have done a lot of work in as far as like female empowerment and those kind of things. Absolutely amazing, needs to happen. But we haven't done as much, I think, in terms of like mental health stigma and those kind of things when it comes to men. I think it's starting to get better. I'm actually working on some mental health pieces for college men and those kind of pieces. But that's still a big piece of it, is that there's this stigma that you kind of do it on your own and you don't admit to these problems, or men don't have these mental health problems. And so just that first step of like getting help can be really hard. And I have had, multiple, male clients who prefer to work with a female counselor. Yeah. And I totally, and I get that on a lot of different levels.
I think it's sometimes easier to talk to somebody like where you feel like they get you from a maternal perspective, maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
We also like, I feel like this whole perimenopause, menopause, like that's getting a lot of attention right now.
It is
huge, but we don't talk about menopause, right? Like men go through hormone changes too.
Absolutely.
And I can't even tell you how many conversations I've had with men, because I'm 47. So, there's men in their 40s are starting to lose testosterone. They're starting to gain estrogen. That's where you see like man boobs and all that stuff. Yeah. And they don't think about it as like that's an impact or a trigger for their mental health. And it is. And that's our command center in everybody's body. Absolutely. Right? We're all humans.
No, I think that makes, that's a huge piece. And I think just that, hormone shifts and those kind of things, we really do have to think about that for both, for men, women, just humans in general. And like because that does have an impact on your body. Yeah.
So how does it impact like the expectations that we put on ourselves, like biologically? How does that impact our mental health and like how we can kind of, again, we were talking about how people put too many things on their plates and a plate falls. Like, I think sometimes our brain just purges things that it doesn't need because it's not a priority, but we're getting so much thrown at us on a daily basis. Like, how do you balance that expectation internally with yourself? And like, I don't know, Because I mean, especially new grads coming out of school, like, again, it's a whole new world, right? The world's their oyster, and that's probably super intimidating and traumatic as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is so important, and I loathe hustle culture, like
Me too.
so much. This kind of this thought and this push in society, and the idea that you can have it all, and if you just work hard every day, you're going to have it all, has really done some detrimental things, I think, for us as human beings. And one, it's definitely heightened our stress, but it's also put us in this place that if you're not busy, then you're not being productive. And if you're not productive, then you're not a worthwhile human.
Yeah.
And truly, like, any human is a worthwhile human simply by just breathing. Like, you're here, you're worthwhile.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that really been working with folks on really in the last couple of years, even more so, is this idea of slowing down and really kind of remembering that rest is not a reward. Rest is actually a necessary function of living.
Our bodies. Yeah. The human experience should be built around sleep because it's so impactful.
Absolutely should. And that's actually, like, that's the natural state of our body, right? We're supposed to be in rest and digest the majority of the time. We're supposed to be in a restful state and digesting our food the majority of the time. What we've done with kind of this productivity and these pressures is that we've placed ourselves into this really, a fight or flight mode almost all the time, which makes us incredibly reactive. It means that we're always at a stress state, and like our cortisol is high. Like, it impacts our bodies in so many different ways. And so really one of the big things that I work with people on and teach people about is you have to find that space of recovery and rest. And you may have to start by giving yourself permission for it, but in the end, it should become an expectation where it's just like, this is how I best function, and this is necessary, and so it will happen.
Yeah. I heard slow down to speed up. I heard that saying, and I was like, and it bothered me at first.
Yeah.
And I was like, why am I resisting this? And then I was like, oh, because I don't do that. Right.
Yeah.
But I will say that I have made like a date night with myself once a week where
I love that.
I just don't do, like, I don't sit well, right? I have a full-time job. I travel. I have a podcast, which is basically a full-time job, and I look at this, like, people ask me all the time, like, how do you do all this? Like, especially because you're on the road. And I said, I have learned to have a work-life harmony, not a balance.
Yes.
Because I feel like that balance puts pressure on people, and that's not necessarily a good thing. Like, I do need a deadline. If you've ever heard of Gretchen Rubin's 4 tendencies, like, I'm an obliger. If my boss tells me, like, hey, I really need you to help me with this, I'm going to drop whatever I'm doing and I'm going to help him with it. But at the same time, like, I would never tell somebody to do that. Right. Like, to me, when I'm giving advice, I'm like, no, you got to take time for yourself. But I wasn't doing that. So I was booking a night where I just stopped feeling guilty because I do have one of those brains. Like, I'm an ADHD brain. I, especially when I'm not eating well and that brain gut connection is like on overdrive, I will sit down or I'll lay down to meditate even for 25 minutes and my brain will race the whole entire time. And I'm like, okay, that's not serving me. So by booking a date night with myself, and usually candidly, it's like a Friday night because Dateline's on, I can, make a nice dinner that gets me through the weekend with leftovers, and I just chill. And that's my time to, like, regroup, reassess, figure out what I need to do over the weekend to get all my stuff done if I'm in town. This newfound freedom without having dogs has been really fun because, I mean, I miss them so much. I can't even tell you, and I still cry daily. But at the same time, like, being able to go, like, away for the weekend and just, like, not feel guilty or feel like they're going to die when I'm gone. It's a whole new world, So I find that incredibly impactful in my own life. And it doesn't happen every Friday night, I'll be
Mhm.
honest. It's probably a couple times a month.
Mhm.
But when I do, like I don't feel guilty anymore. And I mark it on the calendar just like I'm on a like if I was married and had a spouse,
Yeah.
right? Like that has become so important to me and I look forward to it now. So I don't know.
I love that. And that's actually something that I talk about a lot with folks is like you have to have planned recovery, right? You have to have
Yeah.
spaces where you have provided yourself recovery and you need to do it on a more consistent basis than the annual vacation
Yeah.
or the holidays and those kinds of things. You do need to have something, kind of you need to have small practices that are daily. You need to have maybe a little bigger practice on that's weekly, even bigger things that are
Yeah.
monthly and those kinds of things that give you that space of rest. And so when I start working with people, we start small, right?
Okay.
So what are the micro steps? What are small ways throughout your day that you can take little breaks?
Yeah.
So
Like just small tweaks
just
make
small
such a big
tweaks,
impact.
that can make a big impact. Even thinking about like, how are you brushing your teeth? What are you doing while you brush your teeth? Are you focusing on brushing your teeth, or are you doing what I used to do, which was like run around for those 2 minutes trying to get other things done that I never really got done, but I always messed up the shirt I was wearing.
Right. I know, I was like dripping. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so now I have a Post-it note on my mirror that has a few of like my daily affirmations, and I read that while I brush my teeth. It's 2 minutes,
Love
but it makes a
that.
huge difference for my day,
Yeah.
right? And so thinking about what are the things that you're already doing? What are the rituals that you already have? And just being more mindful about them and maybe thinking about them in a different way. Maybe when we think about it as like, oh, I'm actually resting, I'm actually giving myself recovery right now,
Yeah.
it takes on a different meaning.
Yeah.
And that's something that's so important.
Yeah. One of the other things I did, do you remember the show Smash? It was like,
It
oh
sounds
gosh, it had to be like
familiar.
10 years ago. It was
Yeah.
like, Catherine McVie. They were
Yes,
putting
the
a Broadway
Broadway.
show on.
Yes.
Yes. So what's so funny is that I have a treadmill in my garage.
Mhm.
I kind of turned my garage into a little gym because I moved, ironically. I moved and like I'm 30 minutes from like a Pilates studio. So I was like, I
Mhm.
have to do something while I'm not, and half the time when I'm about to like when I want to work out, it's at night and I'm not going to walk
Right.
around my neighborhood at night just because I'm a girl and it's scary.
It's
I
fair.
mean, I live
Fair
in a
thought.
safe neighborhood, but you never know. But what I started doing is like I was decluttering my house. I was doing a little
Mhm.
spring cleaning, and I found like the DVD box set because I
Oh my
loved that
gosh.
show. So I dug out my old DVD player. I set everything up in the garage, and now the only time I can watch the show is when I walk on the treadmill.
Yes.
I got a lot of hours in the first couple weeks.
I
I've
love
now
that.
like rewatching it, and I'm watching the outtakes and stuff.
Yeah.
But it was like I had one thing that was the law. Like I could
Mhm.
only watch it if I was walking on the treadmill, so I could like have that time again, like a date with myself. Like I
Yeah.
loved that show, but I also need to like make sure that I'm moving my body because I've noticed the impact that it's made on me. Because everybody says like you have to work out and it relieves stress. But if you don't think you're burned out and you don't think that the stress that's coming at you is actually stress, it's hard to recognize that you need to do that. But when you're walking or moving your body, like you feel that it's almost like a release,
Yes, like a
some
discharge
endorphins.
almost, if you will. Yeah,
Yeah.
with that. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I love that. And so I've heard that kind of referred to as like reward bundling, right? Where you take
Oh, I
something that
like that.
maybe you feel a little more, maybe you feel a little challenged in doing, like you need a little extra motivation to do that thing, and then you bundle it with something that you would really enjoy, like the
Yeah.
show, like watching Smash and those kinds of
I
things. Yeah.
love that. Reward bundling. I need to write that down. I love that. So, I guess if you're moving to a new place, right?
Mhm.
I know I keep bringing it back to moving because we're about to embark on moving season, right?
Yeah.
And it's just Super Bowl and everything, happens all at once. And people, I know before we started, we were talking about that like subconscious pressure that you put on yourself. Like if you feel like you want to move
Mhm.
and like if you own a house, like, you need to put it up on the market, or like that subconscious pressure that you're feeling when you see everybody else's for sale signs around their
Yes.
home. But if you're trying to adapt to a new environment, like how do you how do you balance that stress, knowing it's good stress? Like you moved last year,
Mhm.
right? It was 2 hours from the house that you were currently living in, which even if you like are moving things back and forth is kind of a pain in the butt because it's 4 hours round trip. Like, how did you adapt in a way that was healthy? And you and your husband didn't kill each other.
Mhm. Yeah. So we definitely, we like communication with each other is kind of an important piece, and we're pretty good, in our marriage. I'm 45, and he's in his early 40s, and so we got married at we're older, so
Yeah.
we were in our 40s when we actually got married. So communication looks a little bit different in a relationship. And
You know
we
yourself
had,
better.
established routines and kind of having that communication of like, we definitely spent some time apart and in our recovery time and our rest time. And so it was somewhat keeping some of those kinds of things and having those conversations. But another thing that we did was, it's something we continued in our relationship, but we had that date night. We went out like every Friday night and we went to like a new local restaurant, and like we like to chat with people. So we would just kind of chat with folks and those kind of things. We found a restaurant we really liked. Since we live near a lake, which is awesome, but this restaurant also has like an outdoor deck, and it was summertime.
True.
And they allowed dogs to go to the deck. So we got to bring Hazel, our golden doodle, one time, and she brought all kinds of people around to talk to us.
I bet.
Because she looks like Big Teddy Bear. But I think it was kind of that piece of just like going out together, establishing kind of some normalcy, right? Doing that date night. So we had time with each other, but also time to kind of explore our community and what that looks like. And then something that I did was really trying to be somewhat intentional about finding some networking for myself. So I work from home. I do remote counseling, remote coaching, those kinds of things. And so I'm on Zoom pretty much all day. And so really finding some intentional ways to connect with people in the community. So I went to like the local chamber, and they had a women's night out
cool.
program. And so I went to that, and it was scary. I'm not going to lie. I went by myself. I didn't know anyone walking into that event.
Yeah.
But I made a commitment to myself that I would have at least 3 good conversations and make at least 3, connections. And I was able to do that. And I really enjoyed the table I was at, and those kinds of things. So it's finding some of those things that maybe you're already involved in. So maybe you're already involved in like a volunteer position, or you're on a board for something. What might that look like in your new space, and reaching out and seeing some of those things. And I love the piece of like, playing tourist for a while in your new space, like just exploring it, even if you're moving to like a new neighborhood in the same city.
Yeah.
You're going to find some differences and some great things there. But I think the other piece is that grace. Like we have to have grace, that it takes time. It definitely is an adjustment, and it takes some time.
I feel like it's harder to build friendships as an adult because we're already like set in our ways. We already know, like sometimes I'll get excited. I'll meet somebody like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be best friends with that person forever. Like we had the greatest conversation, and then it'll like fizzle out. And then like, next thing you know, it's been like 4 months. I'm like, whatever happened to that guy on the plane? Right. But I also feel like when we are in that place of like, everything new, right? You've just moved. I feel like it is good to give yourself goals when it comes to networking. So like you said, you got 3 good conversations, because it can be intimidating to go to a networking event by yourself, especially if you don't feel good or if you're burned out or like, adapting to that new community, but giving yourself a goal, like, okay, I'm only going to, I'm going to have 5 good conversations and then I get to leave.
Yep.
I don't know. I've done that a million times and I've never left after 5 conversations.
Exactly.
In fact, I end up like closing the place out. Right. So I think that that's like a really good trick to like shift your mindset about like how daunting, because you have to go to things for my work as well, but it is very easy when I'm not on the road to isolate. And I'm sure you feel that way too, because you're at home. It's, like you're probably business on top, party on the bottom, right? So you can just, and by party, I mean slumber party, like jammies are on. But I mean, I think that's a really like key pivotal like point for you to make that,
Mhm.
yeah, you kind of do have to give yourself that little like grace that, okay, this is hard, right? Like,
Mhm.
I know we're supposed to be good at this by this age, but it sucks sometimes,
Yeah, it
right?
still feels weird and awkward, and I think that that's something that, like, it it does get better. It gets better with
Yeah.
practice, I think, talking to people and doing some of that networking and those kinds of things, but it always just it feels just a little weird.
Yeah, it does. Well, and by being like going to the same restaurant over and over for you and your
Mhm.
husband, like on the Friday night date nights,
Mhm.
you probably started to get to see the same people.
We did, yeah. Started
Yeah.
like,
So
the
what was
wait
that
staff
like?
started recognizing us and those kind of things, and, like, and that helped, right? So
Yeah.
being recognized as a regular and those kinds of things, or a local, because we live in it's a very tourist area. So
Is it?
kind of being recognized in that way, like, just helps solidify, like, okay, we're home.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, you worked with fraternities and sororities, right?
Mhm.
So like I was in a sorority, I was a Sigma Kappa, and like having that camaraderie, even if you don't
Mhm.
like the people, you're still all in the, like you're
Yes.
all in the same group. So it's like you're all locals, right? Once you become a local, like
Mhm.
that's like a designation within the group that's special.
Yeah.
There's something biologically, right, that humans
Mhm.
like tribally.
Absolutely, yeah.
What's
We
that all
need
about?
like we need a sense of belonging. I mean, Brene Brown does extensive work on the sense of
Yes.
belonging and why we need this as humans and why we need to connect with other human beings. That's why, social wellness can be such a important piece. And it it definitely, and I think that that's something that we're still kind of recovering from because of the
Yeah.
pandemic. We didn't have the opportunity to do face-to-face connections
Mhm.
for a really long time. And so a lot of people like missed that. And I think like current college students that are there, like they missed a lot of those pivotal moments while they were in high
Oh,
school or while they were transitioning from high school to college because of the pandemic. And that has definitely had an impact in how, you know, in people's mental health and how they
like show up in
connect
the
with other
world.
people and those kinds of
Yeah.
things. So that's an important piece to remember, is that when you're somewhere new, when you're transitioning, finding a space where you feel that belonging, where you feel like you belong, is incredibly important.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like we severed a lot of relationships over the
Mhm.
pandemic just because you didn't see them regularly,
Mhm.
and I think that
Yeah.
that's a big impact too. Um gosh, I just love this conversation. I so appreciate like having the conversation with you,
Yeah.
especially because you just moved and you know like how that feels. But I think it's incredibly important to put it out in the world that, like, if you are considering a move and you're not in a good place, like
Mhm.
packing up your whole house is going to be even harder.
Yeah.
Mentally making new friends. Like I went through this last year because I had hurt my back and I lost my dogs. Both of them died in 4.5 months. Like people
Mm.
listening probably are sick of me talking about it, but like I was grieving. We had a bunch of stuff happen in the
Yeah.
family. So it was like I took a step back and I did my own framework, and
Mhm.
I'm so grateful that I had put that in there, because even just being aware of it, like,
Yeah.
you know what, it's not a good time right now. Like I have
Yeah.
had some shit happen this year. Like I
Yes.
need to process, heal, and like get back to being authentically me. But
Mhm.
when you don't feel good, you're not you, you
No,
know?
you're not.
Ugh,
I tell a story when I'm talking to folks and delivering, talks and those kind of things about um my own burnout. And I really recognized it when I hit a pretty pivotal moment where I had become like truly the worst version of myself. And
mm,
when I recognized that, I was like, oh my, like, oh
yeah,
crap. I do not want to be this person.
yeah.
This is a shitty person and I don't like her. Like, I want to get back to the playful Kate, the one who was
Yeah.
fun. And so kind of recognizing that work. But yeah, when we're in that state, we're not ourselves.
How did you get out of that?
Uh, so I went and saw, like, I did professional counseling, and that made a big difference for me. And then just kind of doing the work, and then without knowing it, because I hadn't developed my framework yet with preparation, observation, preparation, and recovery, I was doing those things. And I had just found a space where I was able to recognize when stress was coming, when burnout was kind of happening. I was able to better set boundaries for myself and, how I interacted with others. And I implemented that daily recovery. That was a big one because I was spending a lot of time when I was burned out waiting for rest. So it was always when I get to the weekend, when I get to the holiday, when this project is over, when the semester is over, when we have a day off.
Mm-hmm.
And when those days came,
I didn't do anything.
I didn't really do anything that was at least intentional as far as rest goes, right? I may have rested because my body was like, we're done.
Not so fast, Kate.
Yeah.
We're taking it back.
I'm going to make you sick now.
Yeah.
But now it's been, just adding that intentionality and not waiting for rest and taking, I have space in my every day that I have some kind of rest and recovery happening.
Yeah. Even sometimes if it's just like a 5-minute reset,
and sometimes it is just a really short, a short breathing exercise of some kind, a counted breath method. Sometimes it's just like right before we started recording, I was just like looking out the window, just kind of like watching nature, petting the dog.
Yeah. Oh. So my best friend, Stacey Colgan, who was on the show at one point in time, she's an ADHD therapist. Probably about 2 years ago, she's obsessed with Brene Brown. If Brene Brown ever listens to this, I know we mentioned this when she was on the show, but if she ever hears this show, like Stacey Colgan wants you to reach out to her, and like that would make her life, right? But she gave me the book Atlas of the Heart. And what's interesting about that, if you're not familiar with the book, she goes through like if I had to name like emotions, I could probably off the top of my head name like 6 or 7, right? And I feel like most people can name probably the same amount, right?
Yeah.
Like you're happy, sad, like all of those things. But Atlas of the Heart was interesting because it literally goes through, there's something, like how many emotions are there? Like something like 40 or something crazy. Being able, so I had gone through a breakup, and I just had a lot of stuff. Like that same week that my boyfriend and I broke up, I lost my dog Emmy, who I was super, super bonded to. And I just was just broken. Like that's the only way to describe it. Like, like 2 pivotal relationships in my life were just gone. And I tried to get a hold of Stacey because she's not only is she a therapist, but she's my best friend, and she was in sessions, right? So she was actually working in her she has a therapy practice in Illinois. And I was like, what would Stacey do? What would she tell me to do? And I literally look at I have this like bookcase, and I saw the red book, and I had never picked it up before. And I picked it up, and I just started reading, and being able to read all of the different emotions and be like, oh yeah, that's it. That's what I'm feeling. Or, oh my gosh, I'm feeling this. To be able to just articulate that to a therapist was, I love my therapist so much. His name is Kevin. He's amazing. And to be able to pick up the book and say, this is where I think I'm at. And he also sent me this emotion wheel that like you can find, I think calm.com has one to show you like where you're at. Like if I'm feeling super angry and intense, like I can go up the color wheel and like look where that is. But I think that's another thing too. And I don't know what your perspective is on this, but being able to articulate how you're feeling as like a human, sometimes even just recognizing it from that perspective is so helpful for you to be like, okay, I get it. Now I can give myself grace, and then Google like, how do you get over that?
Yeah. And I think that makes a huge difference, that recognition in that piece, because emotions, like they do come across differently. Like grief looks different than anger and those kinds of things. And being able to articulate that is so important. And recognizing that every human experiences all of these emotions and they're all okay, right? Yeah. So that can be a really important piece, is that we're not meant to be happy all the time. We're not meant to be elated and all of these times. We're meant to be kind of this full board like human with all of these different emotions and things. I love the Disney movie, and now I'm
Inside Out.
Yes, Inside Out, and how like
I love Joy.
The ending to that, and how it kind of becomes this piece of like they're all important, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that one, being able to recognize those pieces, but also then honoring that like all of these emotions are okay.
I love that movie so much. So if you're not familiar with it, it's called Inside Out. And basically the cartoon characters, they go through this whole adventure, but there's like joy and anger and anxiety. And they all have a character. And still as an adult, like I watched it with some kids, and as an adult, like when I feel angry, I see the little red dude with like flames shooting out of his head. And I know that that's where I'm at. Right. But they don't have like names per se. That's their names is like joy is joy. And, but it's such a good visual for myself because then I start laughing and then I'm like, this is ridiculous. And I know when I was moving, there would be days that I was excited. I was hopeful. I was angry. I was stressed out. I was pissed off. Like I could experience all of those emotions in like one day. And it doesn't mean that move was going to be bad or good. It was just that I was a human and I was having a human experience and that I had to give myself some grace and be like, dude, chill out. Like go take a walk, right? Go get out in nature. Like just chill out. So oh, well, Dr. Kate, this has been an amazing conversation. I literally just looked down and we're already at 52 minutes. When we started, we're like 30 minutes. I think I say that to everybody, like we're going to try for 30 minutes and it never happens. But this is such an important conversation for anybody going through a transition because it is stressful, but there are ways about it. So if somebody wants to learn more about your approach and your methodology or work with you, how do they find you?
Yeah, easiest way to find me is through my website, which is, you can find it through drkatesteiner.com or liftwellnessconsulting.com. Same website, either will take you there. And you can learn all about kind of working with me and kind of the approach. And I would love to help people. So.
And you speak in front of corporations.
I do speak in front of corporations. Yeah. So talk about embracing burnout and how we, when we embrace that, we can be more resilient to it and just show up and having those better, so that we're not showing up as our worst version of ourselves. We're actually showing up in a better space and having that happy, healthy life.
We all need that right now. Thank you so much for being on the show. I know that this is going to be really impactful for people who are either going through it or about to go through it and being able to recognize like, hey, I'm here. I got to give myself some grace. It's date night time for myself or me and my spouse and kind of getting out of that. But thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I could go on forever and ever about moving you closer to your dreams, but I probably should save some thoughts for the next episode. A big thanks goes out to you for making time for me today. And making time for me, you're making time for future you, and we're both grateful. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe to the podcast, download the episodes, and leave me a 5-star review. I would really appreciate it. In return, if you go to my website, mariette'sonthemove.com, and register for the Monday mailer, I'll send you a free Fred workbook to get your journey started. This is also where you can find all the show notes and all the ways to get in touch with me. A special thanks goes out to Rogue Media for its wisdom and partnership. Until next time, friends, keep moving forward towards your dreams. Oh, and the legal stuff. This podcast is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes. I am a certified coach, not a licensed therapist, and this is not meant to replace the professional advice of a physician, psychotherapist, or other qualified professionals. This is solely my perspective based on my own experience and training. Okay, now it's over. For reals. Bye for now.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.